It's not safe to live in Afghanistan anymore.
It's hard to disagree without a terrorist sneaking through checkpoints in an ambulance packed with explosives, detonated his bomb, murdering more than 100 people. We're live in Kabul. And then an American casino billionaire handpicked by Donald Trump to run the Republican Party's finances steps down, facing multiple allegations of sexual misconduct. Plus, game, set and match as tennis superstar Roger Federer makes Grand Slam history. What is done ahead? We will have a live report. Hello and welcome to Connect the World. I'm Linda Kincaid, live in Atlanta, in for Becky Anderson this hour. First, we're going to start in Russia, where a prominent Kremlin critic has been detained as thousands of people have rallied in Moscow and around the country saying upcoming elections are a sham. Have a look at these pictures. This is the moment Alexei Navalny was bundled away by police. Now, he faces 30 days in jail and a fine if found guilty of organising an illegal protest. And this is the demonstration he's accused of encouraging, calling for a boycott of March's presidential election, which is widely seen as being skewed towards Vladimir Putin. Navalny styles himself as an anti-corruption campaigner, and in an exclusive interview with our Matthew Chance, he elaborated on his opposition to the Russian president.
He is scared of all real competition. We see in these elections that he only allowed those to run who do not even resist, do not even do any campaigning. When they saw that we are actually fighting for people's votes, they got scared. The famous Putin's ratings, all these 86%, 70%, all of that the sociologists and political analysts love to talk about. They exist in only one scenario, when Putin places the candidates he controls.
But that issue of polling numbers, I think, is important because, as you say, Vladimir Putin is polling more than 80% popularity in this country, if you believe the opinion polls. But you're polling just 2%. I mean, how much of a political threat does your movement really pose to this Kremlin juggernaut?
Look, I stood for election just once in my life. In 2012, I participated in the Moscow mayor elections, and everyone was showing me polls when I had 2%. And without money or any media support, I got almost 30%. Same thing goes for the presidential elections. Putin doesn't have an 80% rating. He has an 80% rating when compared to other candidates, whom he has let run.
Opposition leader there in Moscow. Well, let's go to Moscow. Our senior international correspondent Frederick Plackton is following this story. And Fred, I want to start first with the protest. Rallies happening right around the country. You were out in the cold for many hours today amongst the protesters. Give us a sense of the feeling on the ground.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was very difficult for these protesters to organize in the first place. There's severe restrictions on any sort of rallies here in Russia, and certainly the one that we saw in Moscow today was one that was not sanctioned by the authorities, and therefore, as the authorities say, was not legal. That's, of course, one of the reasons why Alexei Navalny was placed under arrest earlier today. Now, there were still several thousand people who showed up there, and I would say that that's round about what we thought would have happened. They stood there, they chanted for a while, they had some smaller signs, very difficult to get signs to these protests as well. They then tried to march on the Kremlin. They sort of got into the vicinity of that area and then were sort of channeled away from the Kremlin again. But by and large, it was a fairly decent turnout, considering that it was fairly cold today and that also the authorities made it fairly difficult for them to organize as well. One of the things that I do have to say, there was a large police presence in and around the rally that took place today, but at no time did we see any sort of violence. There weren't mass arrests either. So by and large, a very, very peaceful protest as well, Linda.
And Fred, no surprise, of course, that the ringleader of these demonstrations, the opposition leader Alexei Navalny, has had his offices raided by police today, and he has been taken into custody. What's the latest?
Yeah. Well, exactly. He came to this the rally that he himself had called for organizing, and I would say he lasted about 3 to 5 minutes maybe as he tried to get to that rally before he was detained by the authorities. Again, that was something that he was probably expecting, that a lot of the protesters that we spoke to say that they were expecting as well. He then put out a Twitter statement, or tweeted that he had been detained, but still called on people to come to that rally because, as he said, the rally was about their future and not about him being placed under arrest. Still, it did seem to energize the crowd, at least for a while, many of them then chanting Navalny for president. But it was something that, by and large, was expected. And you've noted also the fact that this was really part of a larger sort of cat and mouse game that was going on throughout the better part of the day, where his officers were first raided in the morning by the police, saying that there had been a bomb threat from those officers. Some staff members were detained from him as well. And then in the end, when he made it to the protest, he himself was placed in detention as well. So it's something that was thought to have happened. But at the same time, the big question now is how long is he going to remain in detention? It seems as though for what he might be charged with, it could be up to 30 days, which of course will make things very, very difficult for him and his movement in the upcoming time until the presidential election, Linda.
Absolutely. And those elections, of course, happening in March. All right, Frederick Plackton for us in Moscow. Thank you very much.